Well, good afternoon, everybody. No, it's still morning. Good morning, everybody. It's very nice to be here with you. I didn't anticipate such a great turnout. I feel a little unprepared, but it's okay because the more I think about it, the more I would really like to hear from the community here after I share how the first year has been for me in Worcester Public Schools and where we're going as a district. So if you'll allow me just to give you just a quick kind of run through of what's happened this school year, and then maybe write down any questions you might have, and then we'll have a dialogue back and forth. How does that sound? Yes? Okay. All right. So as you heard, and I really want to thank Esperanza for setting this up. This is my 30th year in education. It's very hard to believe that. I started here last school year. It's been one full school year. I started in July. And so I came from California, which is a very different system, very different state, more different than I thought it would be, but it's been a great learning experience. And so what I promised the school committee that I would do when I first started was to take the time to learn about Worcester and speak with people and find out what are the strengths of the district, where are opportunities for improvement, and what priorities would they do if they were me. And so I met with community members during the summertime this year, or this time last year. I think that's when I for sure had met Ruth. I know I had met Esperanza at different settings, maybe some of you as well. I'm looking, I'm not sure. I met hundreds of people, and I asked them at the beginning. I just spent time getting to know them and let them get to know me. But then when school started, I entered into what I call chapter 2 of the listening and learning time, where I went out to the community, had forums at different times of the day and in different parts of the community, asking the same questions, which were, what are the strengths of Worcester Public Schools, what are opportunities for improvement, and help me prioritize what would they do if they were me. I asked that of community members, I asked that of parents, I asked those same questions of educators, my principals, my teachers, my counselors, everyone that works in the Worcester Public Schools that chose to show up. I asked that of students. We have a superintendent student advisory, and I asked them the same questions. They had a lot to tell me about what I should do first. Of course they did, right? I asked that of, I'm trying to think who else, any other stakeholder groups. No, and then as we gathered the information, we put that information out on the website, and we used a software program that allowed people to kind of rate the statements that people said, and it was really nice because it translated into whatever language you needed it to translate to. And you could put it in your language of preference, and then it would translate back into the language that someone else needed it. So it's a very nice tool. It's called Thought Exchange. It's a great way to get lots of thoughts together. And then I brought all those thoughts or those themes to the school committee, and I did that in December. So I spent the first 6 months really getting to know Worcester Public Schools, getting to know, again, where people's heart and desires were and where we should take the district. And so 6 themes came out. One of the themes is to recruit and retain a very talented workforce and to work on diversifying that workforce. Because I heard from students, I heard from staff, I heard from families. Our teachers, our staff, very caring individuals. Like, they love our children. The students said that, and as a teacher, when children say that, it fills your heart. So I heard that over and over again from children. But I also heard it from parents. I heard it from educators, their peers. I heard it from community members. So the love is there, the desire is there. We need to keep working on bringing more people in that have that same love, desire, and start to reflect our community. Because as you know, just looking in this room here, Worcester Public Schools is a very diverse community. We educate our public school system, we educate who comes to us. And the city of Worcester is a community that our mayor will say is a welcoming community. Everybody is welcome here. And so that means our school district reflects that. And we need to keep working on helping our the people who work in our schools to also reflect that. I always say it's talent and it's diversity, and it's not one or the other, it is both. And so we can do that. So that's one of the areas. Another area is student wellness. And so I see I've got some young people here. And I'm sure you've all heard, and you might have grandchildren and neighbors or whatever, that children are struggling with healing from the stressors of the pandemic. They were struggling before, but it really compounded it. The isolation, the impact of social media, where children, especially youth, technology is, it's like an extension of them now, and it's good and bad because it allows them to stay connected. I have a daughter; she's just turning 30. I was actually kind of battling with her on the phone before I walked in here. 30s, a little challenging, but anyway. But technology has been in her life her whole life, right? Pretty much since she was a very young girl. And so that has good and bad in terms of isolation and socialization, and that contributes to the stress, anxiety, and depression that our youth are feeling more and more. But it's not the only thing, right? And so figuring that out is really important, and that was a theme that came out. Coupled with that, the third theme was this idea of schools where the climate and culture feels safe for everybody, where people want to be there. And that, in my mind, is not just the children, it's the staff who work there and it's the families who come in, right? And so creating a climate and a culture at a school and in a district where people feel included. That doesn't mean everything you ask for you get, but you have a seat at the table. And we hear when you're talking, and we don't dismiss the challenges that you're facing, and instead we problem solve together. So that's a third theme. None of these themes are simple, as you can imagine, as you're listening, right? They're very complex. A fourth theme was, as much as we have great educational programs in Worcester Public Schools, because we do, we have lots of different opportunities for children, what we need to work on is getting those opportunities across the district and not at just some schools. And that's a challenge too, because as we think about our high schools, we've got Doherty's being built. Beautiful building, right? What Doherty's going to be able to offer to the children who go to that school is not going to be the same that can be offered at Burncoat High School, for example now. Burncoat has an emphasis on arts and fine arts and dance and all of that, and we want that for them. But how does a parent decide that? How does a child decide that? How do we create for all and then have specialties, right? Figuring that out is not going to be easy, but we're going to keep working on that. So that's the fourth. The fifth one, let me make sure, our facilities. So that kind of went with the Burncoat statement that I just said. So Worcester Public Schools has approximately 52 buildings. Okay, 46 schools, some specialized programs that are in separate buildings, and then the district office and some of our schools it's more than one building, right? So we have many buildings, 52 or 54, it depends on which ones they're counting on that day, right? Well, the beauty of Worcester are the older facilities, right? The architecture, right? Like when I came to Worcester for my interview, I fell in love with the historical buildings. I'm a history major, as you heard. It's breathtaking to see. The challenging side of that is they have to be upkept, right? They have to be maintained. The home that we purchased, built in 1909, beautiful brick colonial. I said, if we're moving to New England, we're going to find something that looks like New England, doesn't look like California, but it has its challenges as we are living in it as homeowners. And so the same thing for our schools. So I have schools that are over 100 years old. They were not built to educate the way we need to educate our children today. Most of my elementary schools don't have playgrounds. That is so sad to me. Our children don't have a place to play outside. And so many of our children live in triple-decker homes, right? And so they don't have backyards either. And what do we do about that? They weren't built with playgrounds. As people will remind me, Rachel, when these schools were built, children went home for lunch. because mom was at home, right? They'd go home for lunch, they'd have some playtime, then they'd come back. So our cafeterias are not put together the way that we would expect. That's very different for me because in California, that I never had to experience. We always had playgrounds, we always had a cafeteria. They weren't always the best, but you had something. That's a challenge for us. And we don't get a lot of money from the state for that. That money would come through the city, and the city only has so much money as well, right? Because it's finite. So how do we modernize our schools so that our children get what they deserve, and our educators work in a space that they deserve to work in, and not bankrupt the city, and move us forward progressively, right? Those are very complex challenges that Worcester Public Schools will not solve by itself. We have to engage with our city, and we have to engage with the state. And so we've started those conversations because that's a big one. That's going to take a lot of time. But if we don't start it, we'll never get anywhere, right? The final theme that came out of it was people really enjoyed having opportunities to engage with the district. So when I first came, the description of Worcester Public Schools is there's a moat around this district. People are not allowed in, they don't feel welcomed, community partners don't feel welcomed, and I thought, oh, interesting. Not the way I work, so that moat has disappeared. Those who work closest with Worcester Public Schools feel the difference. Those who are more removed may not totally feel it yet, and that is what the theme is keep working on outreach and ongoing communication so that people feel that the Worcester Public Schools are part of the city of Worcester and that we're all partners in this. We have different roles, of course, but if anyone thinks that one person named the superintendent of schools is going to turn this district around, they don't know enough about change leadership, right? Because we all know in here that one person does not do that work, that it is a team. And the more the team is developed together, the greater I like to think of it as we've got these patchworks, right? Like I don't quilt. Does anybody in here do quilting? Yeah, okay, so you'll understand this better than I, and you can help me with this analogy a little bit better. But I like to think about, we've got all these different things that happen in our district, right, and in our city and in our children's lives, and there are these patches, right, these quilt pieces. And the stronger that the team works together, that's what weaves it together. That's what brings those patches together so that we have one full quilt. Otherwise, if it's not nicely sewn together, then it starts to just unravel, right? And now you don't have a quilt anymore, which means it doesn't serve anybody. So we want to wrap ourselves around our youth. We do that together so that our youth are nice and warm and cozy and can be the brilliant scholars that I know that they are and that they can be. It's about what the adults do to make that happen. So that's what I've learned in the last 6 months. So then I took my team and I said, all right, we got so much work to do. First thing is, how do we do this? And I just started asking questions. And what we learned quickly is we didn't have a lot of content or information written down. It was all based off of what someone knew in their head because they'd been doing the work for a really long time. And then when those people leave, we've got some retired educators here, all of their history goes with them. All of their knowledge goes with them. And then we're kind of left with a vacuum. And it doesn't happen intentionally, but if we don't take the time to pause and say, we need to write some things down so that we can continuously improve upon them. If we don't pause and do that, then we're never going to get it done. So that's what we spent this last 6 months doing, is getting we have now a framework for instructional design, and we've got a supervision guidebook for my principals so they can evaluate and give good feedback to our staff so we can recruit and retain. We've got a safety emergency protocol handbook. I mean, I can go on and on about some of the things that we've created. That was last year. I'm getting ready now to share with the school committee where we're going to go as a district. But the little preview that I'll give you, that I've given them is we're going to be a future-ready district that puts systems in place to support future-ready schools so that our youth are future-ready and they have the what we're calling a vision of a learner. They leave our schools with the dispositions and the skills and the ability to work in whatever field is available to them, because the fields are changing rapidly. With technology and what is available now, jobs that exist today will not exist in 5 years. And so what we need to do is prepare our youth to be adaptable and flexible, to be able to change with this entity out here that we don't even know what it is yet. And what we're learning is, of course, we need the basic cognitive skills, right? They need to be able to read, write, and do arithmetic. No question there. We can't, that's not going to be enough, though. They also need to be, have that self-leadership and that drive, and how do you manage your time, and how do you work with others, and how do you develop teams, and how are you a part of a team? And then they need those interpersonal skills. And those interpersonal skills are probably, as the data is showing, are some of the most important, because how you work with others, how you empathize with others, how you influence and guide others will really make the difference on what your career can look like in the future. Because everyone's going to know how to read, write, and do arithmetic. The Worcester Public Schools graduates will have that. They will know how to lead themselves. They'll know how to lead others. And they'll have those skills on how to work in challenging situations, what we like to call social emotional learning, but it's so much broader than that. And so everyone sitting here, I think you can imagine how important it is to be able to work with others and how to engage with people who maybe don't look like you, don't have the same lived experiences as you, but they're part of your world and you're part of theirs. And how do we do that so that we're a better society and not a society that is not engaged, not caring about each other, right? So with that, if I can I open it up to questions and comments, and does that work? Okay. And thank you for translating. It's not easy to do simultaneous translation.
Questions?
I'm sure you all know that. I know, I heard. Thank you so much.
In general, how do you handle classroom discipline and disruption? And are you heading into any kind of program to kind of cut back on that sort of thing?
Great question. Thank you for that question. So the actual discipline, of course, is handled at the school site. But I think your question is like, what's the policy? What's the procedure? What are schools supposed to do with it? Is that the accurate?
So that the student body in general is not restricted in their ability to learn because of the time element involved with discipline and disruption. Do you send those kids immediately out of the classroom, or does a teacher have to work with them?
So it depends on the incident, for example. So if a student is standing up and using profanity and something like that, that's very drastic, then the school would have a procedure in place, and the expectation would be that they would send them somewhere to reset the child. Something's wrong, right? What we have to always think about is when there's a misbehavior of some sort, what's the root issue? And get down to the root issue so that it doesn't keep repeating. When we have students who are repetitive, what I like to call high flyers, right? When I was a principal, I knew who was going to be coming to my office on a regular basis. My job was to figure out what is the issue, what's the need of that child, so that they start to change their behavior. And because if we don't change and get to the root of the issue, then the behavior will never change. And then over time, they become adults who don't know how to self-regulate themselves either, right? So can a teacher send a student out? Absolutely. Depends on what the discipline is. If it is, I'm not picking up my pencil, the teacher needs to work on that with the student, because when a student and a teacher have a relationship, those kind of things don't happen.
Now, in my day, all of our days, we remember being sent to the principal's office, and that was a serious event, and being tapped on the hand with a ruler, we all remember that. writing, "I will not talk in class 500 times," or some such thing on lined paper. So there were methods and procedures to deal with it. What are we doing to deal with it? I'm not asking you how profane the language is or something
Yeah.
you mentioned. Is when there's one element of disruption, is that student sent out of the classroom?
So I'm going to again say it depends on what the disruption is. So some teachers will send a student out of a classroom honestly because they don't have the work, they don't have something to write on. That's not appropriate to send to the principal. So if the question is, if a child is truly disrupting a class, because disruption is a subjective statement, right? What a teacher thinks is disruptive is not the same for other teachers. So what we are required to do by law, and this is new in Massachusetts, is we are required to have alternative means to suspension, so we can't suspend for anything. We have to have alternatives unless it falls within certain required codes, if you will, laws. So principals have ways by which they work with their school adjustment counselors and their assistant principals to get to the root cause, to teach the child a new behavior, and return that child into the learning environment. And that is the responsibility of any school district in Massachusetts.
Well, I suggest that, particularly in high schools, that parents are allowed to, some controlled basis, sit in the classroom on a monitoring basis and see how things are going at their discretion. Just visit the principal's office, say, "I'd like to sit in the math class today," or arithmetic, whatever you call it. Are parents allowed to sit in and observe?
Yeah, there's no law that's saying that they can't. Yeah.
But are we proactive in trying to create that sort of thing to control discipline?
So the principals bring in their the parents as they need, and they problem solve with the families. Absolutely.
Hi, I have a couple of questions, but if you only want to do one, that's fine.
up
Wondering
to you.
how the sex education program is going. Wondering how you're doing without police in the schools. I believe there's no police in the schools now, or more limited than there had been. And about retaining teachers, because we hear about how difficult it is to retain them.
Thank you. So I can answer all three of those. So first, if you would allow me, I want to rephrase the term sex education. I think that in itself leads people to get very uncomfortable with it, right? So it is a health education framework, and it is, as I have learned, because of course I stepped into this and it was already adopted, there are components that, so we adopted portions of, and you'll have to forgive me, I don't recall exactly what the national curriculum is, but the national curriculum had some kind of more questionable pieces. We don't have those in what we're using. What we adopted were things about teaching children at the age-appropriate level, right? How to interact with each other, how to keep yourself safe, how to let people know, somebody know if someone is not, going past your boundaries. And so the families who have opted, so it's an opt-out, right? So if you don't want it, then you exit out, otherwise you participate. Any family that has participated in it has no concerns with it, that has risen to the level of the superintendent. So the opt-out people, what we did this last school year when I started learning about the concerns, right, that are out there, and what I believe is not good information, is what I asked was, how did we inform families? How did we allow families to come and take a look at what the actual resources are? And they told me, we didn't do a good job of that, Rachel. And I said, well, so then we need to do that. We're asking parents to make a decision about their child, but we're not giving the information. So last school year, we started this, and this year we'll do it again. We have a Know Your School night where parents come. We had, I like to call it a little Lucy stand from the Peanuts, where we had either a health educator or a nurse or somebody there that could answer questions about the curriculum to parents. As a result, some chose to then allow their child to do it, but not everybody has. And I believe that parents should have that option until they feel comfortable with it, right? And that they should have that option every year. So one year they might feel fine, another year they may not. I do believe that the more parents learn about what this looks like in practice, they'll be more comfortable with it, which kind of goes to your statement about having parents come in and you know, observe the lessons while it's happening. So it's going to be an ongoing project, I would say, because when it was rolled out, it was done maybe a little bit more, a little bit faster than maybe it could have been. Not being here, I don't want to pass too much judgment on it. I just know by what people tell me. What I can also share is at the state level now, they are also at the state looking to alter the health frameworks and the curriculum to be very much in alignment with what Worcester is doing. So we were actually kind of on the cutting edge. And, you know, the belief, so if you've heard this, this is absolutely not true. We are not teaching children how to have sex. That is not part of the curriculum. We are not teaching children. Now, might children be talking about it with each other afterwards? That might be happening, but that was happening before. We all know that. What we're trying to do is teach them how to care for themselves. So there's the part on the sex ed, or the health curriculum. The next question, you asked about police and schools. So we no longer have, and the city council and school committee took action on this before I was here. So I'm going to say 2021 maybe, or the very beginning of 2022, January 2022, to remove school resource officers from our high schools. But instead, what we have now is a school liaison officer, which means we have a memorandum of understanding with our city police, and we have, by quadrant, identified liaison officers. So an officer that is kind of like our point person, and if something takes place, then we call that individual for them to come in. Thank you for coming. The evidence so far is that it's been working exactly the way we need to work, that it needs to work. We call them when there is some kind of law enforcement need, so a penal code violation or some kind of violation of the law. But when it comes to school discipline, that's the job of the principal and the assistant principal, and we want them to take that job because they're the ones trained in how to work with youth. Police are trained on how to enforce laws, right? So they're not the same thing. So we will be doing like a survey at the beginning of the school year of our youth and our community to see where things are at. Or we're going to do some kind of assessment. I'm not sure what it's going to look like yet. We're already starting to talk with our city police to take a look at our MOU and how can we improve it. One of the things that we want to do, and they want to as well, is to have more community policing programming, right? So that our youth see police as partners in a safe community and not someone to be afraid of. And so you do that by building relationships, right? So we want to do that moving forward. And then your last question, I'm sorry. Teacher retention, thank you. So thanks to the school committee, we finalized a very strong contract with a very substantial raise for our teachers, so they're very happy. So not only are we able to retain our teachers, but we've got people now that are interested in coming to Worcester Public Schools, which is exciting. We are well aware, though, that nationally there is a shortage of teachers, right? So now the pendulum swings in education. There's times where we have too many teachers, and then you can kind of watch it, where all of a sudden you're going to have a whole bunch are going to retire, and then we're going to need them again. And we're at that point. And so part of our work when we talk about retaining and recruiting is we're developing a pipeline so that whether we start from an instructional aide and we help them to become teachers, or our parents who come from many countries, how can we help them to come into our system and move them up, and support them in the education and the licensure. We are also working with many partnerships with the wonderful universities that are here in Worcester. Clark University, Worcester State, a little bit with Assumption to help us with our teacher pipeline, but mostly Clark and Worcester State, a little bit with Holy Cross, but we're tightening those up. And then every time I'm around youth, I try to encourage them, if they like children, we want them to come and work for Worcester Public Schools. And so we have a small but emerging program for our own students, a grow your own, if you will, to become our future teachers. So lots of different kind of tentacles to make that happen. And then most importantly, when we get them, we have to retain them, which is what you're talking about also, right? So that's how we treat them. That's how we give them voice in the work. The youth today, again, I've got a 29-year-old about to be 30, they want their voices to be heard. And if the place that they're working at doesn't do that for them, they will leave and go somewhere else. And we're very aware of that, so we have to be different in our strategies for retention. And so welcoming work environments, working with our principals on how do you work with your teachers, your counselors, your support staff, so that they feel part of a school community and not that things are just being done to them. So one of the values I state off all the time is we include people in decisions that impact them. And that means bringing them to the table at the beginning. Doesn't mean they get everything they want, but at least we're starting to talk with them and then we're explaining why something is happening or isn't happening. Thank you.
May I add to what you said?
Yes.
Okay. As an ex-educator, when you are new in Worcester Public Schools, there is professional development and you always get a mentor. You're not left on your own. I mentored many. So therefore, you become attuned to how the school works. Every school basically runs the same way, but every school has its own personality. So there's always a seasoned member of the staff that volunteers like moi, and will say, I will help you, not just with the paperwork, but with questions on discipline, with questions on holidays, with other questions. They also have the Human Resource Office, which tells them how many days, and the union, how many days are personal days and how many days are sick days, okay? In response to the teacher reduction, many of us were of my generation, Elizabeth, so we retired, okay? But that doesn't mean that Dr. Monárrez is not taking our opinions, our professional opinions, okay, to heart, because we are the life of Worcester Public Schools. So many of our students, Eric Batista's brother, La Familia, the officer that died, were part and are products of Worcester Public Schools.
Yes, you may.
I have a question in Spanish and then I'll translate it. Si hay programas disponibles para estudiantes con hiperactividad y dificultad para aprender y problemas de concentración. That's the first one. La segunda, si tiene alguna escuela que se enfatiza en estudiantes con problemas del habla y problemas de concentración, para estudiantes que tienen early intervention, he wrote in Spanish, intervención nueva, intervención novicia, temprana, that's the word.
Do you want to translate them?
Oh, okay, sorry. By the way, this was part of what I used to do when I worked for Worcester. Are there programs available for children that are hyperactive and have challenges learning or problems with concentration? That's the first question. And if there is a school that emphasizes or is solely, not solely, but has the opportunity for children that need speech therapy and focus on challenges with concentration. For children that have early intervention is even before preschool. So it could be 3-year-old, 4-year-olds. That's because before they enter Head Start or kindergarten.
Yes, thank you. So first question on programs for children with ADHD or any kind of concentration needs. We have, but do you hear the hesitation in my voice? Right now they're placed in our special education programs. We are actually I've got an audit happening for our special education programs because we have, in my opinion, an overrepresentation of children who are identified with special needs. I'll tell you why I think that's an overrepresentation. So I was in California schools for 28 years. I was a director of special education, and the federal kind of, it's not a law, but it's kind of like guidance for the percentage of children that should be special ed, right, is 10%. That's the federal. And when I worked in schools in California, it was 10% when I first started, and then slowly it has creeped up a little bit. So it was somewhere around 11 and 12%, okay? So if it's 11 and 12%, that's more than the 10%. But in Worcester, we're at 20% of our children who are identified with special needs. That's double. That's very worrying to me. That makes me think that we are over-identifying children when maybe they are second language learners. They come to our schools learning one language at home, that's the first language, and we're placing them in programs. Or we're saying they have ADHD and therefore they need to be in special programs when really, especially little boys, they're active and they might be identified with ADHD, but they grow out of it. And so what can we be doing in our general ed settings, right, our regular classroom settings, that are engaging enough that keeps children connected, right? Because when we identify them for special ed, what ends up happening is they miss time in the general ed classroom. So I'm using a lot of educationalese. So when we say they're special ed, they don't get time with the regular peers. We pull them out, or we, to help them, but then they're missing the time in the classroom when they're learning how to read and write and socialize and get along with each other, right? So we have to be very careful about over-identifying or saying, here's a child with a problem and we're going to put you over here, versus here's a child with a need and we're going to put those supports into the classroom and support the classroom teacher, because I don't want my teachers feeling overburdened, right? I want to give them the tools. I maybe put an instructional aid in there and help to make classroom engaging so that the little boys, because I would see them when I taught, they can't sit down in their seats, some of them, right? So they're up like this all the time, right? Let them just stand and do it. Like, it's okay. It's not a big deal. That's what they need. Let them tap on something. And I'm saying little boys because I saw it more. We've got little girls like that too, right? So I'm just saying, we have the programs for ADHD. I just want to improve them. I want to improve them. I think we, from a place of good, we may be hurting our children. And we're not trying to, but we're just trying to get them what they need and not overwhelm teachers. But in the meantime, they're missing out on what they should get with their peers. And if you've got a child who doesn't get along with others, for example, how are they going to learn to get along with others if we keep taking them away from others, right? We've got to teach them how to do that. It's not easy, but if we don't ever start, they never will learn. And then they become teenagers who really act out because they know what happened to them. They know. And they start to feel like there's something wrong with them. And there's not, right? So that's the ADHD. The second question about early prevention for speech and language, we have it, but we need to get better at that as well. So we have speech therapy throughout the district. We have early childhood, but we're making that one of our priorities this coming school year on how do we grow our early childhood, really starting from the birth through age 3. We're in conversation right now with some community partners on how they might be able to help us with that. Because we can't do it all, but we can help coordinate so that we can have them do more with our families, right? Because from the age of 0, right, when they're first born, or even, till they come into our schools, it's the parents. So we want to help our parents and get them the resources that they need so that they enter our schools, even more prepared, if you will. So we have both programs. Can I say that they're stellar? Not yet. Can I say that we're aware that we need to get better? Absolutely, and we will. I want to make sure I answered his, is he good? Yes? Okay. I know Ruth had something, and then I saw some other, and then you'll do the rest. Okay.
Thank you. I just want to reach out to the gentleman who spoke about the students. My name is Ruth Rodriguez. I was the first school community liaison for the Worcester Public School. We're talking about in the 1970s when the bilingual program first started. What I want to share with my white community is that I have witnessed so much racism against Black and Latino students in the Worcester Public School. And I just want to share this with you because the Worcester State did a study in Worcester Public School, and they found that Latino students are suspended and expelled 85% higher than white students for doing the similar thing. And I just want to share so you know how that has happened. There was the only Puerto Rican principal we had here, one day received a note from a white teacher with a list of 4 names of students that she wanted to have expelled and suspended because these students were not complying with the district policy that you cannot have a phone in the classroom. When the principal went down to talk to the students, and she looked across the classroom, all the white students had their phone on the desk, but none of them were on the list. I have witnessed, as the first school community liaison, which was working with the community and the school, I have witnessed how my community has been changed, have been treated in this district. When the majority of students were white, Latinos were only maybe 2 or 3%. Blacks were very also. There was never any police in the school. The curriculum was wonderful. Today, the majority of students are Latino, and all of a sudden, they need policing in the school. I think we need a conversation with our community to understand that our students are just, kids need the same humanity that all the students need. And that's all we need. So I appeal to my community. Like I said, I've been working in the city. I taught at Chandler Magnet. In fact, I was one of the group that went to the school committee requesting that we have a school where our children can learn about our culture and continue the language. Before bilingual education, students who came to the Worcester Public School without not knowing English, some of them were even placed in special ed. I asked the superintendent once, why you put them in special ed when you don't have bilingual staff there? What we needed was the bilingual program, which taught English and maintained the language, a second language, and taught the culture so that we can, feel that we all have, we all have the respect that we all need. I want to learn your language, I want to learn your history, and I want to share mine with you. And that's all I'm saying.
I think I saw a couple of other hands. No?
One more question. Hi. Before I retired, I ran the United Way Summer Literacy Initiative for 13 summers, where we placed elementary school teachers in summer programs to help support the children so that they wouldn't experience summer learning loss. So my real thing is learning to read so you can read to learn. And can you please address that and also talk about some of our newcomer populations who come in middle and high school and are very struggling readers, both because they may not know English, but also because of interrupted school.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it looks like on our standardized scores for Worcester that 2/3 of our children are not reading at grade level. So can you please speak to this?
Absolutely. And thank you for your two questions. So first one, I'll start on the reading to learn, therefore you learn to read, right? Or learning to read, so you read to learn. And we are right there with you. We 100% agree. My assistant superintendent, Dr. Marie Morris, who's been in the district her whole career, is what we did this last school year was we purchased a whole new curriculum in reading, or a whole new language arts curriculum. So for those who are not educators, we refer to reading and writing, we call it language arts. So we just purchased one because it was, as I learned, we had, the previous administration had really been focusing on one reading curriculum that was sorely lacking in some areas. And so it wasn't really teaching children the basic foundational pieces of learning to read, which is phonics, phonemic awareness, right? Word recognition, being able to break words down, vocabulary development, reading comprehension. The strategies within it were very missing a lot of pieces, many of them being the phonics, which I don't know how you teach children to read if you don't teach them phonics. And especially language learners need to know the letter sounds and how those blend together to make words. The strategies that I heard that we were using, and they are some strategies, but they're not the only strategy, was really hurting our children. And again, I don't believe none of it ever comes from a bad place. Educators don't wake up in the morning and say, what can I do bad today to really mess up a child's life? Like, that's not what we do. But there's always these competing research studies, and we have to stay tried and true to what we know works. And we know what works when we work with children. So researchers aren't in the classroom all the time, right? So all of that to say, we have a new program now. And we trained our teachers spring, and then we're going to keep working with them moving forward. These are elementary school teachers. The teachers are thrilled with what we have. They're so much happier. Every curricular program has some areas for improvement. So this one in particular, there's some units that we need to make more inclusive. There's a little bit of, what's the word? They're not necessarily as culturally sensitive and reflective. Not every unit. Many of them are, but some need some work. So we're going to work on that. But the actual teaching of reading is going to get better. The other piece because we're going to give them the tools to actually do that, right? The teachers who knew how to do it, they were going rogue and doing their own thing and then hiding it from others, and their children were learning to read. It's our new teachers coming in that don't feel safe in doing that. And we have to do something. It's not okay not to give them what they deserve, the teachers themselves, so that they can teach. So that's happening, as well as an improved, I'm not convinced that the reading assessment that we use is the best. And I keep pushing on my team, like, are you sure that's the best? I know of others. Does it do this, this, this? So now they finally are like, okay, we're going to step back, Rachel. We're going to look. Is this a good predictor of, one, the MCAS scores? Is it a good predictor of reading outside of MCAS? Because if we're using it to guide instruction and it's not meeting the need, then again, we're doing it to ourselves. So we're doing that this year to take a look at it. One of the core values, we want to include people in the decisions that impact them. We want to include our teachers in that conversation and our principals. We don't want to do to them. I would only finish off this part about the reading in saying that, and I know that MCAS can be, I guess, well, no, just the conversation about MCAS has lots of opinions, perspectives. I don't want to use MCAS as the sole determinant if my children are reading on grade level. And so I just would add that. Okay, so now your question about our newcomers, and most specifically our newcomers that are coming in older, right? Middle school and high school ages, and what are we doing for them? Not enough is what I'm going to say. I visited I visited our newcomer school, and what we had and what we're doing now, we need some work. I think so what I know about language acquisition is if you come literate in your home language, you will become literate in that second language much faster. But if you come and you didn't have the opportunity to attend school in your home country, or you had disruptive schooling, then the learning environment's different. And what I found out was we've lost track of some of that. So I said we're doing a special ed audit. We've also got a multilingual audit that's going on that we should have done within probably late fall. And then we're going to bring a group of people, and we'll let you know, Esperanza and Ruth, because we want you to be part of it, to help us improve this, because I'm not happy with what I see. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Is that it? I want to thank you so when I had my graduations this last year, I got a picture of my graduates and me in a selfie. Would you indulge me in a selfie that I could post? Yes?
Que si le permiten que ella tome
Foto.
una foto de ella con otros de ustedes incluidos para postularlo. ¿Dónde lo vas a poner?
Twitter.
En Twitter.
Okay?
Dice que sí.
Okay?
Dice que
All
sí.
right.
Bueno, I just wanted to share a little bit about literacy. Literacy happens to be my background. Second language learning happens to be my background. And it is true. If a child is literate and they come in the 3rd or 4th grade, it is easy to transfer the skills. However, if a child is a novice learner, we're talking preschool or kindergarten, we teach them to read all the way from pre-K to grade 2, and then we begin in grade 3 and up to read to learn. It is a process that's modeled by the teacher that I modeled many, many times, and we do it very carefully. Is there a perfect assessment? I found when working on my studies, there is no perfect assessment because we all learn differently and we all attack a test differently. Tell me, how many of you did well on comprehension and multiple choice? Not me. But when it came to writing, I was an ace. Well, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias
Thank
por
you.
venir.
Thank you. Let me get this picture.
Let me also wait. Let me thank the children.
Oh.
We have several students. Thank you so much for being a great audience and for your wonderful questions. We have some children that are here today that will be helping and serving lunch that are Worcester Public Schools students who are part of the Upward Bound program. The Upward Bound program helps them prepare for college. I have a granddaughter to prove it. Tenemos unos estudiantes aquí que están ayudando a servir el almuerzo, que son parte de un programa que se llama Hacia Arriba, Upward Bound, que los ayuda a preparar para la universidad. Ellos son Mike Batiste,
Who's that?
Mary Nozoka, Steve Ousu, Ida Grace, and Kylie Abduckley. They are from our staff, Dr. Monárrez, your children.
Thank you. All right, so let's quickly get a picture so then we can enjoy lunch. And then scholars, I'd like a picture of you when you're all done if we could, okay? All right, okay. All right, so I'm gonna go this way. Oh, there we go. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. That was good. That was good. Thank you.